Don't scab for the bosses, don't listen to their lies. Us poor folks haven't got a chance unless we organize. Which side are you on?
Hello.
Which
Hey, y'all.
side are
What is
you
up?
on?
This is Remarks.
Our podcast.
It's a podcast.
You could say.
One might say.
One might say. This is what I sound like. I'm fine. My voice is slowly returning, but it's just gonna be a little sultry, sexy episode this week.
I like it. I like the sultry sexy.
Thank you.
Phoebe does not have COVID.
I don't.
It's just a cold.
It is, yes. And I'm like past the point of transmission really at this point. And I got tested and everything. We're good people. But yeah, but I just sound kind of sexy. If I get any kind of anything at all, it's like immediate bronchitis. And I don't know why, but I do.
That's so weird. I feel like I rarely lose my voice when I'm sick.
Yeah, I don't. Hey.
I get sniffly, but I don't I don't know.
Yeah.
I always feel like I get sick too, like right before I play shows, like music
that's the
shows.
worst.
Like it always happens too. I'll have like a big show coming up, and then like 2 days before, I'll be like, "Fuck." I feel like shit.
I feel like shit. Funny story. So I always like fall asleep with my laptop in my bed because I'll usually be like watching a little show or like researching something sad. But my laptop was dying last night, so I plugged it in, and then I was watching Bob's Burgers, and I had taken NyQuil, and I fell asleep, and when I woke up, my laptop cord was literally wrapped around my neck, like trying to choke me out, and I was like, ha ha ha!
Jesus.
It was like scary.
That's insane.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, maybe I should not do that. It's like kind of dangerous.
Just yeah, I don't know. That kind of shit does scare me. This is not really related, but like, I don't have a collar on moonshine, but I know that like they make most cat collars breakaway ones because like a lot of cats will jump and like accidentally hang themselves.
Get caught on shit, yeah.
It's so sad to think about.
That is sad. She's eating the rug. Girl, what are you doing?
She would. Anyway,
yeah.
Moonshine's cute.
She is cute. Yeah, I get that fear though. Like,
yeah, no, scary stuff.
you have to have like a special collar for Tonks with her like very long giraffe neck.
She does have a giraffe neck.
I know her.
So cute. We talked about this last time, but I love Tonks. She's the best.
She's really a great dog. She's so amazing.
So cute. She was a racing dog.
She
before,
was, yeah.
right?
She's a rescued racer.
Yeah. That's what.
Terrible industry, by the way.
Yeah. Fuck
the racing industry for sure. Anyway, we don't need to get into that this episode, but they kill so many fucking dogs each year. It's terrible. Anyway. Prisons.
Yeah, this is part 2 of the prison episode. Pretty fucked up stuff thus far. So yeah, let's get back into it. I think we left off in the 1950s was kind of like where I had left off last episode.
Yes.
Which again, 1950s, pretty much the non-problematic time. Nothing bad happened.
No. Probably the purest time in our history.
Yeah, nothing bad ever happened in the 1950s, that's for sure. But yeah, so we had kind of left off was talking about phrenology and eugenics.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, I'm in.
Which, a quick review, of course, phrenology being the study of people's skull shapes and how that would decide mental ability, and then eugenics being like survival of the fittest, like social Darwinism kind of shit.
Yes.
So not wanting disabled people to reproduce, which is obviously fucked up.
Yeah. Strongly fucked up.
But yeah, so all of this bullshit research led to many prisons keeping records of one's like threat level, heavy air quotes on that, and obviously phrenology has we could do a whole episode on that because it's just a super long history of being extremely racist.
Yes.
But yeah, so as you might imagine, this led to some fucked up decisions. In the 1890s, so we're going back a little bit, the Kansas Home for the Feeble-Minded, as it was called, began mandatory castrations. Which,
Jesus Christ.
That's where eugenics leads you to, people.
Forced sterilizations.
Oh, yeah, it's so fucked up. And I think I don't know if we had talked about this in the last episode, but, like, South Africa has a huge...
Oh, my God, yeah.
history of that and just being... I mean, obviously, they were a fucked up apartheid state, but Indiana became the first state to enact a compulsory sterilization act for certain individuals, which,
Jesus Christ.
Again, at the time, I mean, it was racist, but they, like, disguised it as, like, oh, it's for the criminals and the feeble-minded and stuff, but, like, yeah, it was obviously got pretty racist.
Yes, like all law in America.
Yeah, like, just America in general. And, of course, this whole time, prisoners were still being used for cheap/free labor by capitalists, and the South did eventually adopt that model after the Civil War. So, you know, I had kind of talked about how, like, leading up to the Civil War, there wasn't too much, there wasn't, like, really penitentiaries or anything in the South. Like, it was more just, like, you defend your property with, like, a big shotgun or whatever. But eventually they did start doing this after the Civil War because they didn't have actual free labor anymore, so they had to do it legally or institutionally.
Right.
While around the turn of the century, labor movements were pushing for the end of private leasing of prisoners by business owners. State-run prison farms for labor began to pop up, which were basically the same thing, but instead of, like, having a company being like, hey, I'm going to lease out some of your prisoners to come, like, work for me or whatever, they were just like, oh, then we'll just do all of, like, we'll just make, like, labor farms that the state runs instead of, like, having a private company do it. Which, again, is the same thing. It's just as bad.
It is, yeah. You just went through, like, legal channels, basically.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's what's fucked up is, like, it was all legal.
Exactly, yeah, is that, like, you could do that.
Yeah. Stupid. An Oregon judge in the 1960s refused to send escapees from Arkansas back to Arkansas because of the, and this is a quote from that judge, institutes of terror, horror, and despicable evil. He compared the state-run prison farms to the Nazi concentration camps.
Holy
like,
shit.
They were really, really bad. And
which,
again, that was in Oregon, which, like, Oregon isn't necessarily, doesn't have a good track record either for things, but yeah, it was wild. Arkansas was one of the worst there was. There was about one prison guard for every 65 prisoners in 1966.
Fuck.
So, like, I don't know, like, obviously not having a whole lot of guards doesn't seem on the surface like it'd be a terrible thing, but, like, you know, like, prisons, like, fights break out and things happen, and if there's one guard for every 65 prisoners, you're more likely to use, like, violent force to keep people in line and shit. So, like, lots of fucked up stuff. The state was profiting off of the prisoners, but so were, like, other people in the prison. For instance, the prison physician was making about $150,000 a year on selling prisoners' blood donations to hospitals. Jeez. And this was at the Arkansas Federal Prison Farm, which, I don't know, is just so fucked up. Like,
that's like you're literally using people as, like, a body farm, basically. I mean, it's similar, like, in slavery times when they were doing, like, gynecological experiments and shit on enslaved people. Yeah,
because they were just like, we got all these people, nobody gives a fuck.
That we don't care about, so we can just do whatever we want to them.
Yeah, I mean, even then, it's, like, kind of like Nazi Germany.
Totally.
Which, yeah, lots of fucked up. I mean, the stories of all the, like, human experiments and stuff, especially on, like, twins. Like, they had a big hard-on for twins. But, yeah, it was fucking awful. Arkansas was the only state at the time that could still whip prisoners, which I thought was an interesting note. Like, I don't know. I guess, and again, this is moving into, like, the 1960s, so it's like, I don't know. I feel like whipping people in the 1960s was pretty, like, barbaric still.
Yeah.
For it being only, like, 60 years ago now.
Exactly.
I don't know. Kind of wild. An investigation was started in 1966 and found in these prison farms there were, and this, I should give a preface, this is going to get a little graphic.
Oh, yeah. This episode altogether is going to be...
Yeah, because this is going into kind of like some of the punishments and things and that are happening. So, trigger warning, going to be some body horror type things, so skip ahead if you don't want to hear it. But yeah, so in these prison farms, there were reports of wire cutters being used on prisoners' genitals.
Oh, fuck.
Stabbings, obviously. Nutcrackers to break the knuckles of people.
Oh.
Trampling inmates with horses.
Oh, my God.
And just to add a little bit of, like, salt to the wound, I guess, they would charge inmates for hospital time after beating them and, like, when they would get injured with these kind of things. Which, again, is so fucked up. Oh, my God. I'm
genuinely speechless.
But honestly, I could also see, like, that happening nowadays, too.
Of course. I'm sure... I actually would be curious to know that, because I'm going to get a little bit into, like, prison hospital facilities as well.
Yeah. Yeah, because, I mean, obviously, I would imagine prison hospital facilities aren't...
They're bad.
Yeah.
They're real bad.
Up to code, as one would say. But yeah, so it's like, and I don't even necessarily know, it didn't expand on like how it would happen, but I can only imagine that like if you had like a labor camp and you were paying the prisoners like a tiny sum of money,
like commissary, or whatever, kind of,
you would just like take that from them and do free labor for their hospital visit or whatever.
Yeah.
Which again, so fucked up.
Or just make them labor overtime, or whatever, or take every cent that they would have made from like that laboring, whether it goes to commissary or whatever it was back then, and then it's like you don't get to pay for anything extra, like you get nothing, menstrual pads or any of the shit that you would get out of commissary.
Yeah, or I can even imagine like maybe extra like jobs for them to do or something.
Sure.
I don't know. It didn't expand on it, but again, just very like salt in the wound.
Yeah, that's so fucked up. Like that's like a level of like, I mean, it's evil.
It's the
evil. Whole thing, it's evil, but that's just like, that's like you are a sick fucking individual.
Good old Arkansas. Good place. Never been.
I have been a couple of times.
Yeah, you have a friend that lives out there.
I do. Shout out to my friends in Arkansas. My friends in Arkansas are amazing people. Which, all that being said, like, these like rural and like southern places, the governments of these places tend to be very terrible, which is extremely unfortunate for the people living there. Like,
yeah, no, absolutely.
No shade to the place in general, shade to the people that are in charge of these places, because it's horrible.
Oh, for sure. And it's frustrating because I just feel like the South, too, just has, like, that weird reputation of, like, I don't even know exactly what it is, like, like, obviously, racism and slavery, of course, but, like, just being really brutal about things, too, like...
Yeah.
I don't know, and, like, the Bible Belt and, like, the manly, like...
Yeah,
weird,
like the toxic masculinity kind of thing.
I feel like it all just kind of, like, stems from the South there.
Totally. Well, it's, like, a conservative culture that, like, has been very held on to.
Oh, yeah. Very, like, resistant to change.
Totally.
Just things like that. I don't know. The chairman of the prison committee in the state, when asked about the allegations, had these choice words to say.
Yeesh.
Arkansas has the best prison system in the United States. And again, after being asked about, like, hey, what about the stabbings and the people being trampled over by horses?
Jesus Christ.
Federal courts actually had to intervene for reforms to begin to take place, and I believe that happened towards the end of the 1960s into the 1970s.
Wow.
So, like, I just think it's not funny, but it's just like, they're like, hey, what about all this fucked up stuff that's happening there? And he's just like, nope.
Best. It's the best.
It's the best. No problems.
Sounds like...
No notes, honestly.
No notes. Sounds like Donald Trump.
Yeah, honestly. Like,
it's the best. That's it. It's the best. It's the best.
What about all these illegal crimes
We're the
you've
best.
been doing?
The best.
Nope. No crimes.
The best illegal crimes. The best human torture.
Gotta love, I mean, if you're gonna torture some humans, Arkansas, they were the best at it.
I mean, yeah.
I guess in the prison system. I can't say overall.
True.
But
True.
The civil rights era saw some attempts at reforming, and there was a landmark case in the early 1960s, which was Cooper versus Pate, which was when the Supreme Court gave an inmate the right to sue in federal court, which was a big breakthrough.
Yeah.
They could sue in federal court to address their grievances under the Civil Rights Act of 1871. So obviously, up to this point and at this point, of course, and even really today as well, like, the general public didn't really see prisoners as, like, having rights, like, they were like, oh, you forfeited your rights.
Exactly. I hear that all the
did
time.
The thing, which is, again, fucked up, because they are still human beings. But yeah, so, like, if you didn't like something that was happening in the prison, people were just like, well, fuck you. You don't have a say. And this case was a big one because it was like, they were like, oh yeah, you do get to, like, press charges if something bad happens.
That's a big deal.
This case in particular, it was an inmate that at the Illinois prison was... Sorry, I can't read my my handwriting. It's dark. Was actually barred from seeing his minister because he was a black Muslim man.
Oh my God.
And there was a unanimous vote that he was protected under the Civil Rights Act for that. So that's cool that Congress was like, oh yeah, that's kind of fucked up because it literally states that everybody should have freedom of religion. And if we're going to have, like, Christian preachers in prisons, we need to, like, let people see Muslim preachers.
Thanks for the bare minimum, Congress.
Or Muslim ministers. I don't exactly know what the term is for a Muslim religious leader.
I can't say I'm sure either.
I
will find out.
In the 1970s, saw the prison population grow as more pressure from both parties was put to be tough on crime. Mm-hmm. Nixon began his campaign with the war on drugs.
Good old Nixon.
Good old fucking Nixon. God, I hate.
Goddamn guy.
Did you know? This is a little bit of a tangent.
I love it.
What's his name? Fucking Roger Stone, like that. Is that his? Yeah, Roger Stone. He's like the lobbyist guy who, like, fucks over tons of countries.
Okay,
like, he's a piece of shit. And Donald Trump pardoned him, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, he's a big piece of shit. Has a full back tattoo of Richard Nixon, I believe. Honestly, I'm pretty positive. No. I kind of want to look it up to double check. I'm pretty sure it's his entire back, but I know he has a Richard Nixon tattoo.
I just, like, I mean, I know that you can just, like, be evil and, like, agree with things that, like, Richard Nixon did, but, like, the level of, like, commitment, like, I'm not gonna get a fucking Karl Marx back tattoo, like, I love the guy or whatever, but, like...
So I do have to retract. It's not a full back tattoo, but it's on his back. Here's a quick pic.
I mean, no, that's, like, it's not small.
I mean, that's like,
it's there.
It's
that's
there.
Like...
You can tell what it is. It's just his fucking
It's a
head,
straight
too.
up, it's just a portrait, and not even, like, not a neck, not, like, a bust type area. It's, like, just Richard Nixon's, like, floating egg head on this guy's fucking back, on Roger Stone's back.
God, it's so bad. I hate it.
Good Lord.
That's like almost as good as Ben Affleck's.
I was just going to talk about Ben Affleck's tattoo.
Oof. Honestly, it's... I feel like we've talked about this before, but the point in your life where you're like, I'm going to get a full back tattoo of a phoenix, like, that's a commitment. Like, you have to go all in on that.
It's a commitment, and honestly, it's like, I'm impressed,
Yeah, like, I respect the decision.
Yeah, like, that's like, you are like, this is what I want.
This is what I want to do for the rest of my life. Like, this is the person I want to be. Like, it's set in stone at that point.
I am the Phoenix back tattoo guy. I am the Richard Nixon back tattoo guy. I am the
Richard Nixon back tattoo guy, yeah.
Fuck.
Oof. Back on track here.
Anyway.
I guess back on track, we should probably take a Dizzle
Grizzlies.
All
right.
Ad break to the layman.
In layman's term. Yeah, we've been at it for a minute. Okay,
Yeah,
products and services.
Products.
Yay.
We back.
We're here.
Talking about prisons, talking about Richard Nixon back tattoos.
Talking about people.
If we ever break, I don't know, what's a good goal?
If we ever break, let's say like 10K listeners.
10K listeners, I'll get a Richard Nixon tattoo on my butt.
Yes.
Of his face.
Yes.
Like 10K listeners. It's weird because you can't really see like the subscribers through Anchor.
Oh yeah.
But
can we see on Spotify?
Maybe, I don't know. I'll have to look into it more.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. So listen to the podcast. I'll get a Richard Nixon head tattooed on my
Fuck
butt.
yes.
But yeah, so war on drugs, famously war that you can't really fight because drugs
Yep.
are not an actual autonomous being.
Right. Yeah.
Possibly up there with the dumbest wars that have ever been waged.
Oh yes, it's like in the top 5.
I would even say I would say that the war on drugs is like right under the like Australian war against the emus that they like lost.
Wait, what?
I'm pretty sure Australia had there's the like war of the emus where they were like trying to. There's like so many emus they like got into like a conflict with them. Look it up; it's a real thing.
I need to know this for my fake Australian persona.
Yeah, the emu war.
The you know,
Sorry.
The emu war.
Anyway, so yeah, all of these, of course, were thinly veiled racial rhetoric.
Mm-hmm.
The war on drugs, obviously we know, was highly targeted at people of color. And the CIA allegedly, for legal purposes, planted crack cocaine in black neighborhoods.
Yep.
Yeah. That sowed the seeds for a little-known guy named Ronald Reagan, our friend of the pod, our boy. When Reagan took office, the prison population was at about 329,000. When he left office 8 years later, the population had nearly doubled to 627,000.
Jesus.
Of course, the increase affected communities of color the hardest, and all that legislation was fucked up. And again, it's just this whole like strong man, like we're tough on crime, we're not gonna like, And again, it's just that like prevailing attitude of like you're in prison because it's your fault, and especially on like drug charges, because nobody like viewed drug addiction as like a disease or some things that needed like rehabilitation. It was like you just need to sit in a cell for a few years and then or the rest of your life.
To go. Yeah. Yup.
On the state level, we have seen incarceration almost quadruple. In 1978, there were about 182 people imprisoned for every 100,000 residents in Texas. By 2003, that was 710 per 100,000. So, I mean, that's... In that time span, that was like a little bit over 20 years, 25 years. And it's like 182 to 710 per 1,000 residents. Which is, again, fucking unhinged.
Seriously, though.
Like, I just feel like if you're seeing this much crime, like... At what point do you think, like, oh, maybe what we're doing isn't working?
Oh, that's the thing. It's like, if the number of incarcerations is trending upwards, that means your prison system doesn't work. Because it's not doing anything to rehabilitate people that are, like, quote-unquote, committing crime. To make them not commit crimes anymore. And it's not doing anything to persuade people. You know?
Yeah. No, and it's
like I feel like your prison population trending upwards is literal. It's like factual, evidential proof that your fucking prison system doesn't work.
Yeah. Well, and it's like, I think we've talked about this before, but it's like any prison system that has a life sentence or a death penalty has literally failed as a rehabilitation system.
Yes. That's proof that this does not work.
It's just proof that, like, it's not about rehabilitating citizens. Like, it's just fucking stupid.
Oh, my God.
Anyway, that basically leads us to today. And if I had to give my expert synopsis, I would say that the prison system began corrupt due to the poor planning by the nation's founders, and kind of them just, like, not thinking... Because, again, like, our nation was founded for people to be like, fuck Britain or whatever, you know, fuck taxes. So I feel like none of them really thought about, like, what they would do when they had to actually, like, stop crime, you know?
Yeah.
So, like, they had poor planning on the nation's founders, and instead of having a coordinated plan on tackling crime, the government has purely responded to the issues that arise, and very rarely do they ever, like, proactively try to prevent crime.
Yep.
Which we'll probably get into more of what Phoebe's talking about how it's, and what we talked about last week, how it's like, it's a profit motive industry, you know?
Yep.
Because of the reactive attitude we have seen injustices towards the poor and primarily people of color throughout the years. We live in a system of punishment rather than rehabilitation. On more of a personal level, like, ideally, I don't believe in that prisons should exist at all, and that communities should find just ways to rehabilitate its members. And a large factor of crime is poverty, which is the root cause of what needs to be addressed in most of the crimes. You know, I feel like if you look at, like, the increase in incarceration, you'll probably see an equal increase in wage and wealth inequality.
Yep.
But all that being said, in our current system, I would, like, in a more realistic sense, I'd like to see more reforms to lower sentences, abolish the death penalty, and use more funds, whether that's like tax dollar funds or money that, you know, is made off of the prison system, to fund rehabilitation programming. And because of the corrupt nature of the state government, I think this would have to be instituted on a federal level. But then you also deal with the corrupt nature of the federal government.
True.
So it's difficult because, you know, like we were talking about, like, in Arkansas, it's one of the worst prisons around, and it's was on a state level. Like, there wasn't that much federal regulation, and it's just because everybody there was fucking racist. So it's, like, hard to be like, yeah, we should let the states do it.
Right.
But I feel like if the federal government just had more, like, enforced regulating it more, that would be... a big thing. But I really... Sorry.
No, that's okay. I kind of interrupted you. I was just going to say, it's like, I think that it's the same thing that we always talk about, where it's like, if we want to see actual real change enacted, we're never going to see that happen through the channels that exist, because they exist the way they do for, like, a reason. However, like, I think that if we are able to rally enough, we can enact, like, some reform changes at least, which, like you said, it would have to be federally, because then it's like an obligation on everyone, and it's not each state being like, well, we still want to legally abuse people.
Yeah, I think at least moving it to that to, like, begin with, so the reforms can start. And I think a big part of it is, like we were saying, is reforming how people view the prison population and prisoners, you know, like
100%.
It's a tricky subject because there's a lot of pain and hurt that is around that kind of stuff, but especially for non-violent drug sentences and you know, I feel like that's a great place to start, like we had talked about 2 weeks ago with Riley. Like, getting people out of prison for life for marijuana charges when it's literally legal in multiple states, you know. But yeah, that's the brief history of prisons. Again, we don't go too in depth here because we're on a time constraint. But
truth.
But yeah, that's all I got. So it's
amazing.
Throwing it over to Phoebe.
All
Ball
right.
is in your court.
I'm dribbling. I'm throwing a 3-pointer. I don't know anything about sports, you guys.
Home run.
Yeah, I hit a home run in basketball. So I'm going to talk a little bit about like what actually goes down inside of private prisons, and a little bit about state prisons as well, and a lot about solitary confinement. So, definite content warning for violence, self-harm, suicide, and rape. I'm sorry in advance. It's rough, but, you know, like Taylor was saying, I mean, we need to not only shift our perspective about the people that are in prisons to, like, having compassion for them, but also you have to have an awareness of how bad it is in there. And, like, nobody deserves this level of harm, you know, regardless. So the conditions inside of private prisons are notoriously terrible. There's abuse of guards, suicides, overuse of isolation. The list of atrocities goes on. And like we've been saying, I mean, you might be asking yourself, like, why should I care how a prisoner's treated? Didn't they do something to deserve that? Well, you know, as I've established, a lot of people in private prisons and just in all prisons have been poached by the justice system. You know, these are usually people from underfunded communities where crime rates are higher due to like a higher police presence, crimes of necessity, and most typically profiling. And not to mention that people surviving in prisons are people.
Actual human beings.
Yeah. Which, like I said, I mean, even people who've committed violent crimes don't deserve the treatment that they receive in U.S. prisons. It's torture. It's genuine torture. You know, if prisons were truly for rehabilitation, there would be a focus on education, compassion and de-escalation training, there would be sensitivity training, and most importantly, working with those who've been incarcerated on how to reintegrate back into society, rather than the major focus being on punishment. And one of the most notable private prisons for violence and unsuitable conditions is East Mississippi, who's owned by Management and Training Corporation. The state of Mississippi required private prisons to operate at a budget 10% lower than state facilities. And so with the budget for state facilities are already being much lower than other states, this leaves an extremely scant budget for private prisons like East Mississippi. The consequences, it's fucked. And that's a requirement that the private prisons have to run at a 10% lower budget.
Was that to like support people sending their prisoners to federal prisons?
I guess.
I mean, to state prisons.
Right. Yes, I guess, but it's like that didn't do anything about that.
The
you know.
Point?
Exactly.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. The consequences of this low budget is, you know, education programs being cut, low quality food, and underpaid staff who are not going to be motivated to intervene with violence among inmates and are much more likely to leave inmates in isolation. The guards at East Mississippi only complete 3 weeks of training before taking a position, which I had kind of mentioned last week, which that is just slightly less time than your average police officer.
Yeah.
So, good.
All good.
Good. You know, and in 3 weeks, there's no way that you're well-versed in de-escalation. There's no way you're prepared for the situations that are going to arise in a prison, you know, in a prison. And surely you're not trained enough to handle the complex emotions and the intricate stories of those that are in the prison. You know, 3 weeks is not enough time at all to become someone who owns and lords over every part of someone's daily life, especially someone who is surviving through all of the things that you have to survive through while in the prison system.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know, it's weird. It's like this, because I don't know, it's like this weird, like, hierarchy that, like, happens with, like, the guards and the prisoners, and it just always is, like, fucking awful. Like, I don't know, it's so bad.
Yeah, East Mississippi is extremely understaffed on top of being underpaid. And so when violence does break out, there's so few guards to intervene that the inmates were made to carry around their own weapons for protection. You know, and this is kind of like you had mentioned, Taylor, about in Arkansas, where it's like the number of inmates highly outweighs the number of guards. And so it's just like when violence does happen, much more inmates are likely to be harmed, as well as like the guards are going to either choose to not intervene or use much more excessive violent force. Yeah. So these prisoners started carrying around their own weapons to protect themselves. And with several rival gangs being housed at East Mississippi, the violence was basically inevitable. And once one gang acted out, the afflicted gang would have to retaliate. And then this chain of violence is never broken by the staff, who can't be arsed to step in. And East
probably doesn't have the resources to step in either.
No, exactly. Like, what they have is, like, tasers, guns, you know, whatever. And then there's, like, 2 dudes in the cafeteria where there's, like, however many prisoners.
Yeah, hundreds probably.
Yes, and they don't have... They had 3 fucking weeks of training.
Yeah.
Like, how are you supposed to stop a fight, especially against rival gangs?
Yeah, it's like, I don't know.
Like, there's no way you've been trained to intervene. Again, especially when it comes to the gang thing, because that's such a personal thing and it's such, like, a heavy, intense thing. That needs so much more, like, discussion and training than 3 fucking weeks.
Well, and I can imagine that the pay for the prison guards
it's shit.
Yeah, is probably awful. So it's like that opens up a whole other, like, area of like prison bribery and, like, favoritism, and also guards just not giving that big of a fuck because they don't get paid enough to give that big of a fuck. And it's like,
exactly. Well, because it's like, if you are having to intervene in a violent fight where the number of people having the violent fight heavily outweighs you, and you're like, I'm getting paid, you know, $8-10 an hour to be here.
Yeah.
I'm not going to put myself in harm's way. Like,
and all the prisoners have weapons. Like,
and they all have fucking weapons.
Well,
yeah, like, you're not getting paid enough to get fucking stabbed on the job.
It's true.
Which is, I mean, that's bad. Like,
and it's
if you're working in, I mean, it's a vicious cycle. Like, if you are working in the prison, you should be equipped not only with like the armor basically, but also, like, the means and the resources and the mental health education in order to intervene when people do have weapons, because you are in a situation where people are you know, they're in a situation that they've never experienced before in their lives, and they've been put in situations in which they're having to fight for their lives. Like, you should be fucking equipped to deal with that.
Yeah,
we know now. Sorry, and I'm tangenting, but it's
okay.
Like, we know now, we've been doing this long enough. This is a pattern. You obviously know that this is something that continually happens. So why the fuck, you know, if we're not going to fucking abolish prisons, whatever, but, like, why the fuck is the training not been updated and escalated to learn how to deal with these situations if it repeatedly happens?
Yeah. Well, and it's like, because again, like, as you were saying, like, the prisoners feel like they have to carry weapons because the guards won't intervene. And again, it's just this vicious cycle of, like, nobody's doing anything, so the prisoners get more violent because they have to protect themselves, and then nobody's doing anything. There's also no fucking mental health training for the guards, or focus on mental health, or any kind of rehabilitation for the prisoners. So it's like, they're gonna still be violent because they're not getting any help. Like,
exactly,
it's just stupid.
I know, the whole thing, it's like, it's so contradictory, and just it's the worst. So in East Mississippi, they're not just low on guards, but they're low on hospital staff as well. So this is where I'm getting into a little bit of, like, the hospital situation. With many injuries occurring rather through violence or through self-harm, the doctors at East Mississippi especially, but in any prison, are overflooded with too many patients, and they're unable to care for everyone. You know, inmates at East Mississippi with mental health concerns suffer greatly. Inmates at East Mississippi have completed suicide, they've self-harmed, and in some cases they violently lash out due to mental health disorders that are causing them to be confused and very upset. I am about to get a little bit into the solitary confinement thing, but should we take a little ad break?
Yeah, little break skis.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, breathe a little bit.
Yeah,
take a break.
Because it's about to get intense.
Yeah, and it's just kind of a heavy set of episodes.
It is, yeah.
But go outside, get some sunshine.
Yes.
If it's sunny where you're at. And we'll be right back.
Yes.
Okay.
We're back.
We are back. Things are good. Per usual.
Per usual. As it is in a capitalist society.
But yeah, as you were saying, Phoebe.
So, yeah, I'm going to get a little bit into some shit about solitary confinement here, which I'll probably yell a little bit. And, you know, as per I said for, like, this entire episode, but we're definitely going to get into some self-harm, some suicide, some rape stuff, so, again, I'm sorry. But as I was just talking about to Taylor over a break, like, it's really, really important to talk about this stuff and to name the atrocities, to go into detail about how bad it is, because it opens people's eyes and it reminds you the level of like what we're dealing with here, you know? And it's bad. So, I caught this documentary like years ago, probably like 3 years ago. I cannot remember what it's called. I couldn't find the exact documentary, but I watched this documentary a couple years ago about life within a prison, and I was just fucking horrified watching this. It was following the lives of like 3 or 4 men in solitary confinement, and just how horrible it is. And this guy who was living in solitary confinement, I mean, constantly, every shot of him was just him like begging to be let out. He would continuously, purposefully flood his toilet in order to convince the guards to temporarily release him from society, or from solitary, sorry. So he would just like shove a bunch of shit in his toilet, flush it a million times so that it would overflow, and there would be like, you know, water all over the bottom of his cell, so they would have to let him out to clean it, fix the toilet, all of that shit, so he could just have like a moment out of this cage that he's being kept in. An even more horrifying method that this same guy would use was that he would cut his own wrists open, and then he would have to smear the blood on this small window that was on his cell door so that the guards could be alerted to the fact that he had an injury. Because in these solitary confinement cells, it's literally, they have one very, very slim window that shows like the outside world, and then one very, very slim window that's on their door that the guards can look into. And so if anything's really going down inside of the cell, in order for the guards to actually see what's going on, they have to go up to the cell, look into this very slim, thin window, and check that the inmate's doing okay. And a lot of times they miss a shit ton of stuff. And so, you know, these inmates will smear a lot of stuff, food, feces, you know, whatever, onto these windows so that the guards can be aware that there's something going on with this person. So he would put his blood on the window. And then this self-harm earned him like a short stay in the prison hospital, and he would get to have a little bit of human connection. That's
absolutely awful.
I have no like words for that. Like that hurts me.
It's like, how do you not think that that's like cruel and unusual punishment? Like that's
exactly. How do you not see that? And like, ugh.
And like, I know solitary confinement has been around for a while and whatnot, so it's like we know more about like human psychology now, and how like solitary confinement will literally fuck you up like so bad.
It does.
And it's like, I just feel like, why haven't we fixed this? Because this is a problem, and this is cruel and unusual, and it damages people immensely. Like,
which I'm just going to go off a little bit before I get into my next thing. But if your solution to solving, you know, for lack of a better word, crime, or say an inmate who's maybe been repeatedly violent, your solution to that is locking a person in a cage with a tiny window where they literally spend 23 hours a day in a room by themselves, where in order to leave this room at all, they have to go on hunger strikes, flood a toilet, or cut their wrists open and smear their blood on the walls so that you will fucking pay any modicum of attention to them so they can receive human connection. You know, where these people, the only way that they have of communicating with each other, rather than I believe it's like a once a week, they get to do this job where they're like wrapping silverware and napkins. That's the only time they get to interact with the other prisoners who are in solitary confinement. That's the only time they get to interact face to face with those people. And you have to hope that every other inmate who's, you know, working that day is in a good enough mood to have a nice conversation with you so you can go back to your cell feeling nice for 1 second, you know, like, that's your solution to this, where this is, like Taylor said, this is psychological torture. You cannot fucking argue that this is not psychological torture. You are confining people by themselves in a room alone with little to no entertainment, no contact with the outside world. Like, maybe they get a book, maybe they get a TV, rarely do they get letters. You know, oftentimes their food is extremely scant. Like, that is fucking psychological torture. And if you are okay with that, there's something so wrong in your mind. You are a fucking sick human being.
Yeah. No, I feel you. It's fucking awful.
And like you said, Taylor, I mean, the fact that this fucking thing has been around since, you know, penitentiaries basically have existed, and we're still at the point where we're still doing this and seeing the level at which people are psychologically damaged from this. And it's a proven fucking fact. There's fucking statistics as well as stories of genuine horror. Why is this still okay? Why are we still allowing this shit to happen? It is so wrong and so evil on so many levels. It's disgusting. Ow, I just hit my funny bone.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, sorry, you guys. It's this shit, like, ugh. And I'll tell you a documentary to watch at the end. But anyway.
It's gross, and
it's disgusting.
I don't blame you.
It's disgusting.
Ugh. Anyway.
Yeah. So sorry, more about solitary confinement. So another, in this documentary I'd watched a couple years ago, another one of the inmates who was in solitary, he really was wanting to earn his GED in order to have better opportunities when he was released. Again, this was this man's main focus. Still, while he was in solitary, that was all he wanted to do, was earn his GED so that when he did get out of prison, he could have a couple better opportunities. Continually, he was not provided with the materials to work on this and was not released from solitary. You know, they time after time kept ignoring him. He was putting notes up on his windows saying, all I want is fucking, like, packets to work on my GED. Like, please. Well, because they kept ignoring his asks for things to get his GED, he started a hunger strike in an attempt to get his needs met. And like I was saying, in order to make the guards aware of this hunger strike, he would write notes, he would tape them to the window, and he would smash his food against the window, you know, whatever. And he ended up going to the hospital, as well as the other guy who was self-harming went to the hospital. I mean, these people in solitary continually are going to the hospital. So I could never find what that documentary was. I think it was maybe on the History Channel or something, regardless. But in my search for that documentary, I found another one on YouTube. It's a prison documentary from 2019, and what it was called on YouTube, the little title is Prison Documentary 2019, Life in Super Maximum Security Prison, parentheses, Lockdown and Solitary Confinement. In this documentary, they were interviewing the prison guards as well as the people inside of solitary confinement. And this is just, again, where I have to say that if you are a person who's okay with this at all, or a person who's protecting the system at all, which means prison guards and police officers who use these arrests to create these inmates. So they were interviewing these guards, and this guard was talking about I think it was either his first day on the job or his first day in, like, the solitary confinement sector of the prison. A man in solitary confinement chewed a hole into his own arm. He was chewing on his own arm and took out a chunk of his arm, bleeding fucking everywhere. And as this guard is telling this story, he laughed.
Oh my
God. He laughed. Both of the guards were laughing while they were telling this story. Like, and it's like
a wacky Tuesday thing.
Yes.
Like,
he's like, it was a pretty crazy first day on the job, I guess.
Ugh.
And it's like, I understand people's reactions to things are weird, because obviously that's not your average person is going to see that go down. But how the fuck is that your reaction is laughing? And he was like, serious in his laughter. Like, he wasn't like, I'm sorry, I'm laughing, it just was so crazy. He was like, ha ha, this guy bit a chunk out of his own arm. You are psychologically torturing that man. Ugh. Anyway, okay. You gotta, like, calm down. It's just so, it makes me so angry.
And
so anyway.
What's so upsetting, going back to that guy with the GED, is it's like, literally, like, don't you want people in prisons to, like, be rehabilitated and, like, make a better life for themselves?
Like, why are you denying this man the very thing that you should be fucking encouraging? Like, you should be encouraging people that are in prison to get their fucking GED, you know, to study something, to learn something, so that they can be in these people's minds of people who believe in incarceration, you know, a valuable member of society or what have you. Like, that is what you should be wanting and focusing on. Why are you fucking denying this guy the right to get his fucking GED?
It just doesn't make any sense. Ugh. And also, if you're having all of these solitary confinement people go to the hospital all the time,
repeatedly,
maybe it's not good. Maybe you're damaging them.
Yes.
Immensely.
Yes. Like maybe there's something seriously fucking wrong with this. I don't know.
Like, and I can only imagine that, like, the like upkeep of, like, paying, you know, the hospital.
Yes.
I don't really want to say it's hospital bills, but, like, the costs of sending them to the hospital would be, like, kind of a lot. So it's like, why do you keep doing this? This is literally just torture that's costing you money. For what? Some kind of, like, sick feeling that you're, like, punishing them fully. Like, I don't know. It just doesn't make any sense. And again, like, people who are okay with this are just evil. Like, you're just an evil fucking ghoul. Like, and fuck yourself. Like,
seriously. No, genuinely. Like, you there's something deeply fucking wrong with you.
Yeah. I don't even care. If you're listening to this podcast and you think solitary confinement is tight, stop listening to this podcast.
Fuck you.
I don't want you to listen to this.
Yeah.
Ooh, yeah. We're fucking... I knew we were going to get heated.
Yep. No, I knew I would too. Which, I mean, and I know we're, like, tangenting a lot, and I do have a lot more to say, but, like, which not to compare the lives of any incarcerated person to a life of somebody who's not incarcerated. Those two things are extremely different. However, I think a lot of us can relate to, on a tiniest crumb, to what confinement feels like. You know, last year, those of you that actually gave a shit.
Yeah.
Sorry. Whoops. I'm really pissed off this episode. You know, those of us that did participate in the quarantine part and did that while still getting to go outside and run around and watch our Netflix and also go to our jobs and, you know, live a marginally free life, that fucking sucked so much goddamn ass. Oh my god, quarantine was... I'm psychologically not okay after quarantine. Like, I'm still not, you know? And that was not even a fraction of what solitary confinement is like at all. That sucked so much goddamn ass. You know, regardless of, like, extenuating circumstances, I think we can all agree that time was extremely difficult. And so just, like, I don't know, think about that. And think about what these people in solitary confinement are going through. Take
quarantine and then, like, amplify it by, like, 30 million times.
Trillion. Zillion. Anyway, okay. Getting back on track. So, more on East Mississippi. So, the warden of East Mississippi, Mr. Shaw, he has received incentives for staying under budget. In 2018, when 4 inmates died under strange circumstances and a fire damaged the facility, no repercussions were made against Mr. Shaw. He also admitted that he was unaware that inmates had been hospitalized from beatings. And when Mr. Shaw was confronted about the makeshift weapons that prisoners had made in order to protect themselves, remember I was talking about that earlier, he said, quote, "Inmates have weapons. It's a fact of life."
Now, another choice quote from prison commissioners there. So... it kind of sounds like this guy has never actually been to the prison that he's in charge of.
Yeah, which like, I actually...
He's like, oh, yeah, that fucking place? Never heard of it.
Yeah, he's like, East Mississippi... What? Oh, right. Yeah, right. The prison I own. And a quote from the New York Times, it says, quote, Mr. Shaw had... My voice. Quote, Mr. Shaw had previously been warden at an Arizona prison operated by Management and Training, where there was a riot in 2015. A scathing state report determined that the riot was sparked by Management and Training's, quote unquote, culture of disorganization, disengagement, and disregard of, quote unquote, policies and fundamental inmate management and security principles. So, yeah.
Yeah, they
like,
kind of just don't give a fuck.
No, they don't. And it's like because of the level of disregard that you have for the care for these fucking human beings that you're literally in charge of, yeah, a riot fucking broke out because people are tired of being treated like shit. Anyway, so, kind of in the vein that you were saying where, you know, it's like, it sounds like that dude's never been there. Well, the chief medical officer, Gloria Perry, who took her position in 2008, said that she had never been to East Mississippi. And this was from an article written in 2018.
But she does... So she just works
chief,
at the medical facility, but she's never been to the actual prison?
She's the chief medical officer. Well, the medical facilities are on the prison side.
Oh.
Mm.
So
they like
what?
when they take people, like they will take people to the hospital. That's for severe stuff.
Yeah.
But they have like a facility there. Yeah, she's the chief medical officer. Never been there.
What, you
in
just
10 years?
Zoom all the patients? Like, what the fuck is wrong? Huh?
Yeah. Which it's like, I don't think she's actually like seeing patients, but you should probably go and check and make sure that like your facilities are doing what they're supposed to do and operating correctly.
You should probably know what's happening in the area of medical type beats, since you're the fucking chief medical officer. Mm-hmm. Who the fuck? What?
Yep.
Come again?
I know, you stupid fucking bitch, Gloria Perry.
Ooh.
So,
add her to the list of people we're challenging to a fight.
Yes! Gloria Perry, Dukes up. Trigger warning for rape at this point. In a testimony from one of the inmates at East Mississippi, he detailed how a female guard had mocked him when he told her about being raped. This guard also never reported the rape to her higher-ups.
Yeah.
And this shit happens, you know, that's not an outlying report. No. This shit happens all the time.
No, and it's so sad, because I've actually looked into this a little bit as well, but like, not only do, I mean, like, guards and just people in general not take prison rape seriously, but like, it's become a joke to like to us in the public, like, don't drop the soap and shit like that. It's like, that's a rape joke and it's kind of fucked up.
It's disgusting.
Yeah.
That's disgusting. Like, yeah, again, there's something sick and wrong in your brain. Right, which, and this, this was a testimony from one of the inmates, which goes back to you, Taylor, talking about where inmates could actually sue for some of the things going wrong in the prisons. So, you know, at least at the very least, thank God for that. So, in another testimony from this same prison, an inmate testified that he had been beaten by other prisoners for a solid 14 minutes before any guards intervened.
Jesus.
Yes.
Well, and sorry.
No.
But that's the frustrating thing, is it's like, yeah, it's nice that they can sue, but it's like, you have to get somebody to actually take what you're saying seriously before you can even pursue that kind of like route, you know?
Exactly, and someone who will like actually fucking advocate for you. Yeah,
because I mean, I'm sure there's lots of people in prisons who don't, get visits from family, who don't have anybody to like reach out to give them support, and it's like, if that's the case, then it's like, you can have the ability to sue, but you're not going to have the resources to pursue it.
Exactly. An inmate who had been chained at the wrists, waist, and ankles was being escorted back to his cell by 2 guards when another inmate rushed at him with a knife and a section of pipe. The guards ran away, leaving the chained inmate to be beaten and stabbed for a full 3 minutes until they finally intervened. Per the inmate's testimony, quote, they laughed and told him not to do it again.
Jesus. Ugh. That's rough. This is a rough one.
Yeah, it's a rough one. I'm sorry, everyone.
It's good to talk about,
it is,
but
it's hard.
I understand the cringe.
Yes, so take care of yourself after this episode, please.
Yeah.
The treatment for this inmate who had been stabbed and attacked for 3 full minutes at the prison's medical facility was having distilled water poured over the stab wounds and then being discharged. The following 3 days after this, he was continually bleeding, and on the third day, when the guards saw blood covering a portion of the floor of the cell, he was taken to an actual hospital and treated for 4 stab wounds and a broken leg. And when released from the hospital and placed back in the prison, he was housed in a cell directly next to his attacker.
Wow, good stuff.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
There's... Again, I don't see how people can, like, not see something, like, fundamentally wrong with the system. Like, even if, like, you're not going to say, like, oh, we should abolish prisons or whatever, because I get, like, that's like, a radical view, but it's, like, even just a normal, like, liberal person, I would hope that even, like, conservative people would see this and be like, yeah, like, there's something that's wrong with this, like...
Right. Like, when you're hearing these stories that are true, indisputable fucking facts, like, you can't be okay with that. Like, it doesn't, I don't care what... All right. So, getting into how the COVID crisis affected the prison population. So, of course, prisons were absolutely ravaged during the 2020 COVID-19 crisis and are continuing to suffer with it to this day. With inadequate funds for medical services, no PPE dispersed to inmates, and no possibility for quarantining, COVID-19 was spread like wildfire through U.S. prisons. As of August 2020, 8 out of the top 10 coronavirus hotspots were prisons. And when an Ohio prison was tested in April of 2020, they found out that 80% of the population currently had coronavirus or had contracted it previously. 80%.
Yeah.
That's almost 100 for all those math heads out there.
For all you number wizards out there. Well, and what's so weird is it's like, I guess not weird because I get that it's such a double standard, but like, literally that's like the one place where you could almost certainly have ensured that people were following COVID, protocol. And, like, those are the one place that, like, it didn't happen. Because it's like, I get, like, you can't necessarily control every single person and tell them what to do. But, like, in a prison, the way you have it set up, you actually can.
Right.
And, again, it just goes to show that nobody gives a fuck about prisoners. And it's sad. Like,
yeah, exactly. So, many other facilities have also reported extremely high numbers of COVID. And even with all that, like, the data is not accurate because a large portion of the facilities were not mass testing for coronavirus. Numbers reported as of June 20th, 2020, said that 1,327 inmates in federal prisons had tested positive for COVID-19. The Federal Bureau of Prisons reported that day that they had administered 18,919 COVID tests and that 3,972 inmates had recovered from coronavirus, that 72 inmates had died from coronavirus. So clearly some institutions were fudging the numbers or just not reporting them at all.
Yeah, because I was going to say, because like the amount of reports doesn't match up with how many tests.
Exactly.
Right? So it's like, what happened to all the other fucking tests?
Exactly. Inmates housed in prisons were hit from several angles with this pandemic. A large portion of prisons in the U.S. are overcrowded, with a population that outnumbers the amount of beds available in that facility. There was absolutely no chance for them to socially distance or isolate. As we know, hygienic practices are notoriously lacking, and the supply of cleaning and sanitizing products is very slim. Because the entire world was suffering from this pandemic, outbreaks in prisons were, of course, tended to very last. And the inmates were rarely, if at all, given PPE, and many facilities couldn't even test if they wanted to because of the lack of testing supplies. And on top of all of this, as I've mentioned, prison infirmaries are extremely low quality. They don't have the proper supplies to treat wounds and even like common colds. So they're definitely not prepared to treat a respiratory virus as intense as the coronavirus is. Because of this, the death toll as of April 16th, 2021, over 661,000 inmates and prison staff had tested positive for coronavirus, and roughly 2,990 inmates have died. And all of this I'm not even touching on the, like, ICE facilities.
Oh, yeah.
Which that's, like, a whole other story and a whole other episode. And I'll just briefly mention, like, a quick story about the ICE facilities. When the staff, I guess, at the ICE facilities were criticized for the way that they were handling the pandemic, as far as, like, no PPE, and not sanitizing anything. It almost seems like in spite, they started over sanitizing things to the point where the people captured essentially in these ICE facilities were getting extremely sick from the amount of overuse of chemicals. People were having, like, skin rashes, people were having nosebleeds, you know, all kinds of crazy shit. It was like...
That's, yeah.
Evil.
That's super evil. And again, it kind of just goes back to, like, this idea of, like, if you can see this kind of suffering and your response is to either, again, do nothing about it, or make it worse for people, like, who the fuck are you? Like, what kind of fucking monster? I just can't deal with it.
No, I know. So, the New York Times... Moonshine. The New York Times reported on April 10th, 2021, quote, over the past year, more than 1,400 new inmate infections and 7 deaths on average have been reported inside those facilities each day.
That's the ICE facilities?
No, in
the
prisons.
Oh.
Yeah. As we know, the health of the population inside prisons is already very poor. Factors like extremely low-quality food, close quarters, unsanitary bathrooms, low-quality medical staff, and ailments frequently going untreated. This position inmates at a much higher risk of dying from coronavirus. As well as the age of inmates is unbalanced, with an older population outweighing the younger population in prisons, which, as we're all very aware, the older population was at a much greater risk for dying from coronavirus. Last year, there were large groups of people who advocated for the early release of nonviolent inmates due to the massive outbreak of coronavirus in federal prisons, pushing especially for the elderly or immunocompromised inmates to be released. Despite this public outcry, though, the population in prisons actually increased, and and the number of early releases decreased from the previous years.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
Well, and I guess it makes sense because, like, again, with, like, poverty comes more incarceration, and last year was a rough one for a lot of people.
Yeah, the poverty level increased.
So it's like, I guess I understand the increase in the incarceration, but it's like, I can't think of anybody that was like, yeah, keep everybody, like, most people were like, yeah, just let the elderly and the immunocompromised out, because, like, we're literally in, like, a state emergency right now.
Straight
like,
up.
And the fact that they didn't, again, just kind of shows that they just don't care, and they just want to make money.
Yes, they just want to make money, and they don't view these people as actually, like, human lives. So in 2020, less inmates were granted parole than they were in 2019. Yeah, it's bleak. So with overcrowding, with no releases being granted, people in prison were and still are at a much higher risk of contracting and dying of coronavirus. Much of the spread of coronavirus in prisons was actually due to the guards, who would return home to their communities when their shift was over, contract the virus, and bring it back to the prisons. These same guards would visit all different areas of the prisons, spreading the virus throughout the entire facility. And then, of course, these people can't quarantine. These people are together in extremely close quarters, so, of course, the virus is going to spread crazy. By June of 2020, we did start seeing some early paroles and furloughs of inmates, which cut the prison population by about giant number of 818.
Wow.
Yeah, which it's like, it's like 60% or something of our population in the United States is in prisons. Don't quote me on that number, but it's like a wildly huge number.
I know we have the biggest prison population in the entire world, for sure, and we make up like a very relatively small portion of the world's population, so it's like,
So a whole 818 got
good
to
stuff
get out of there. Inmates in prison, of course, are still suffering from coronavirus, and these numbers are going to continue to grow until we see significant improvements in the structure of U.S. prisons. And we will not see a reduction in the amount of inmates with mental health disorders, inmates dying under suspicious circumstances, and inmates cycling through the prison system until prisons are abolished entirely.
Agreed. I think prisons are bad. And
prisons aren't bad. Period.
We should find more productive ways to live in a society with people.
Yes.
Cool side note, I guess, just of a thing. I've mentioned this to you before. I don't know if I mentioned it on the podcast, but you know Rojava, that like place in northeastern Syria that had like this crazy this feminist kind of like anarchist, but really just like leftist government set up after the dictator of Syria like lost control. They had this thing where they would only, even people that were like former ISIS members only would serve up to like 20 to 30 years in prison, because again they were more focused on the rehabilitation of these people and putting them back into society. And I know, you know, I've had conversations with people, and it can be a weird thought because, you know, again, tensions are high and people get emotional, and it's hard because, you know, people do terrible things sometimes. But I truly believe that like if you have a society and you are putting people in prison for even the majority of their lives, you have failed at trying to like be in a society and like live in a community with other people, because it's like these kind of things happen and these disputes happen, and like you know, we need to focus more on that. But again, as long as there's a profit motive involved,
exactly,
it's never gonna be that way.
Yep 100%.
That's that on prisons.
And that's on prisons. Yeah, it's a sad and difficult reality, and you know, even in an ideal, amazing society, there are still going to be people that choose to do harmful things. Understandable. The only fucking way that we're ever going to reduce harm against other people, as we've seen, this is real, is through, first off, you know, channels to prevent harm from happening. Secondly, advocation for victims of harm and protection of victims. And then thirdly, empathy and accountability and rehabilitating people who have done harm, helping them to understand the level of harm that they've done and why what they've done is harmful, why it's beneficial for them to not do that harm, and reintegrate them back into our society once they have a firm understanding of not perpetuating harm. Because it's right there in front of our fucking eyeballs that what we're doing has done absolute fucking jack shit to reduce the amount of harm going on, and I would argue has increased it.
I would agree.
So,
and like wealth redistribution to make people not like have to struggle to stay alive and commit again crimes of necessity, as they call
crimes of necessity, crimes of survival. Exactly. Like that's step one, is put people in a position where they don't have to commit quote unquote crimes in order to fucking survive on a daily basis. Start there.
I don't know. I feel like we're civilized people. We are smart. We have gotten to this point. It's like we can create a world where people don't have to rot in a jail cell for the rest of their lives. Like we can do it. I believe in us.
We can. Yeah. And that's the thing, is like, as jaded as I am about everything, I believe in us. I believe we can do this.
If we didn't believe in it, then we wouldn't.
We wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be doing
it,
this.
You know?
Exactly.
I thought we were all doomed. It's like, I wouldn't be the point.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
But
woof.
that was a heavy one.
Yeah, sorry everyone.
How you doing?
I'm all right. I mean, I'm fired up now,
Yeah.
you know. But I'm
For sure.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Do what Phoebe said and take care of yourselves. Take a bath.
Yeah.
Do
some,
for a
like,
walk.
Whatever makes you feel good, some self-care stuff. Don't watch that YouTube prison solitary confinement documentary until you feel like mentally prepared.
Agreed.
Like, don't go do that right after you listen to this episode, because
hug your pet. That's a good one. Give them a hug. I don't know, what are other nice things to end the podcast on?
Have a little glass of tea. I don't know.
Glass of wine.
Glass of wine.
Yeah.
Love a good glass of wine.
True.
And get involved with the Last Prisoner Project.
Yes. Thank you for reminding me about that.
Yes.
Yeah, that was the organization that we had Riley talking about 2 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it's some dope shit.
It is.
Helping people of nonviolent drug crimes get out of prison and, you know, fight for, I believe it's lower sentences and even getting out on probation and whatnot.
Yeah, release for, like, marijuana incarcerations.
Yeah, which, again, is, to me, a no-brainer. It's like, it's literally legal.
It's legal.
In multiple states.
Yep.
But yeah, that's a really good place to support.
Yeah.
Even if you don't have a lot of time, you can always donate money. If you don't have a lot of money, you can donate time. You know, there's always something to be done.
Yes.
So.
And I think a good one that I'm gonna like hold myself, and I'm saying it on the podcast, I'm holding myself to it, is doing the letter writing program. Yeah. You know, as we've been talking about this whole episode, these are people, and not just the people in solitary confinement. That shit fucking sucks, and we should definitely like get some letters written to those people. Which I'm not 100% sure like how that all works, but we'll figure it out. But, you know, people in any prison, in any capacity, like, need to know that there is somebody that cares about you.
Yeah.
Like, that's it. So, yeah, let's all write some letters to people incarcerated.
Let us know if you want to hear about those letters. You know, we'll keep everything private for the sake of the, you know, the incarcerated folks, but yeah, if we do that, tell us if you want to hear about how that's going and how to get involved, because more letters the better. So
truly, yeah. Which I know on Last Prisoner Project there is like a way that you can do that. I'm sure there are other things as well. We'll post about them as we find them, but Last Prisoner Project
for sure. Yeah, I guess we want to do pluggables and then call it a pod. Call it a pod.
Call it a
cast.
Call it a cast, call it a pod. Yes, let's do it. You can find more information about these letter writing programs as we find out about them on our Instagram, which is at Remarks Podcast. And you can also go follow our TikTok of the same name at Remarks Podcast.
Yeah, and then you can follow the Twitter account, which is at RemarksPod on Twitter. And my YouTube channel, if you want. It's called The Lefty Agenda. It's pretty cool. Doing a video on Focus on the Family right now, which is
oh my gosh,
an awful organization that did a bunch of shitty things to the gays, and I'm mad about it. So
yeah, same.
So keep your eyes peeled for that.
Yes.
But yeah, other than that, I think that's everything.
Yeah. Oh, we didn't have one for a shout-out game last week.
Yeah.
Which, if you still want to comment about your pet, we genuinely want to know.
True. We'll still shout you out if you are behind.
Yeah, true. I do love pets. But I would say for this week's shout-out game, as brief as you can, just tell us, like, a funny, embarrassing story or something like that.
Yeah, that's fine.
Just something to kind of heal our hearts a little bit after this.
Most embarrassing moment.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be too detailed.
Yeah, nothing like gnarly, but just like a silly, like, oh my gosh, this like faux pas, this funny thing that happened to me.
True.
Just tell us that so we can kind of have a laugh after intensity for an hour or so. So anyway, thanks for listening, you guys. And... Okay, love you. Bye.